Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Food and come and sit down. And we want to thank all of you for totally ignoring the weather outside and coming to something much more memorable than a sunny day in Seattle. So, okay, well, we are totally thrilled to have the dean, the dean from UW here, and she is going to talk about strategies to diversify technical ranks. A few of us met with her for lunch, and we were talking about what happened when she first went to the University of Washington and how things are different for women and for men sometimes. Now, some of you may have heard she was the youngest dean of engineering ever, anywhere. I think, right? Anywhere in the U.S., which is a really amazing achievement. And actually what she did when she got there was even more amazing. But possibly more amazing than all of that was the reaction of a senior faculty member who wrote a letter to people who gave gifts to the School of Engineering, large gifts, I think at least $700 or something. And so, it starts off blah, blah, thank you for your gift. And then he goes on to say he wants to tell them something about, the wonderful things that the school is doing with their money. And so he says, as you may know, the College of Engineering has a new, young, female dean, Dr. Denise Denton. She came here from the University of Wisconsin and during interviews impressed our new president to the extent that he hired her. She has a lot of vitality, many ideas of making engineering more inclusive and more popular with elementary and high school kids, and is not in the tradition of most engineering deans. She has limited academic credentials, and didn't impress some of my colleagues as much as she did the president, but it's too early to tell how she will actually work out. And then he goes on. And this was actually sent to donors, which I think is not only incredibly sexist, but also just outrageously bad business practice, right? To write a letter to somebody who's just given you at least $700 saying, and here's how we're wasting your money. Now, it was true that she had limited academic credentials relative to most new 55-year-old deans. She had unbelievable academic credentials relative to the empty set of no 37-year-old deans, and in fact, probably much more than most 50-year-old deans. She had, she had won tons of awards. She had won teaching awards and awards for her research and just done really, really incredible work. And then when she went to the University of Washington, I can tell this guy, his name is Kermit L. Garland. So Kermit the Frog should know that she worked out very well, actually. And the UW has been thrilled to have her. The ranking of the school has gone way, way up. She's brought in tons of great people, and we're going to hear about how she did some of those things. Thanks, Denise.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon, and I've never had that introduction from Kermit for a talk, so that was unique. And Jennifer was also going to mention that my limited academic credentials were 4 degrees from MIT in electrical engineering, so I guess that's not enough. I thought it was too many. What I want to do today is spend a little time with you talking about strategies to diversify the technical workforce. And particularly in a context like ours, MSR or UW, where we're trying to bring in the very best talent, not only nationally but internationally, in engineering and computer science. And obviously there's a tremendous amount of competition. And I would be happy to entertain observations or questions as we go through this. What I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of background on this topic, talk about my take on the key role of leaders and leadership in diversifying the workforce, talk a little bit about recruitment and some best practices that we have uncovered at UW, and retention. Obviously, recruiting people, that's one step. You get a diverse workforce in the door. That's actually the easier step. The bigger challenge, as you all know, is to create an environment where all those people can thrive and excel and want to stay. So I'll talk some about retention, and related to that, cultural change. What do we in these engineering and computer science disciplines need to do to create a different kind of culture that's more welcoming and inclusive? So the bottom line in diversity, we're sitting here at Microsoft. I'm not at UW today, so bottom line really matters. There's an interesting study that just came out from an organization called Catalyst in New York City. Catalyst promotes women in leadership positions in the Fortune 500. And they did an analysis of 350 Fortune 500 companies over 5 industry sectors, and they measured ROI and total return to shareholders. And the companies with the highest representation of women in the top management teams had a 35% higher ROI and a nearly 35% higher TRS. So there are your bottom line numbers. This, I think, is a really important finding. They go on to say in this study that they could not prove causality, right? This is a correlation, but nonetheless, it's a pretty powerful correlation, and these numbers are pretty impressive. Even if it were only 10% higher ROI and TRS, that would probably get the attention of the CFO. We're talking 35% here. So I really want to kick this thing off with, while I'm a firm believer in affirmative action, and I'm a firm believer in equity, and I think there are a lot of historical practices that were inequitable and immoral and unethical. Those are some of the reasons I work on diversity issues. But I also work on diversity because a diverse organization is a better organization. It makes better products, it creates better services for clients, and it has a better bottom line. So whichever reason you want to choose here, you can do your pull-down menu and pick something. I think this is something we all really have to focus on in 2004 to be globally competitive. So here are some data to just give you a sense of where we are as a country. This is the national percentage of female faculty in different disciplines over a 10-year period. And you can see that from 1987 to 97, the percent of women faculty has gone up from about, say 3 to about 12. So that's a big jump. There's some progress happening there. At the UW, in our College of Engineering, our female faculty is about 15%. And among our peers, this data is for all 300 or plus colleges of engineering. Among our peer group, the percentage of women faculty is only about 4 to 8. So we're double to triple the peer average. And that's a lot of work. That doesn't just happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've made that happen. These are some data on women as percent of science and engineering grad students by field. So you can go pick your favorite discipline. There's computer science smack in the middle. And you see the delta from 1980 to 1997. It's not as large an increase as you see in many of the other fields. And I think you all know that the percentage of women in computer science has actually been dropping at the undergraduate level in recent history. So there's a real challenge for Microsoft and for us at UW around CS in particular, because these numbers are not going up very fast. Does everybody see that middle bar? Okay. So here's a cultural thing. There's a mythology that says that discrimination is only practiced by a small set of ignorant people. And there are a lot of issues we could talk about here around cultural change. There are issues of white privilege. There are issues of male privilege, and we can talk more about that later. That's something we're really drilling down on and trying to understand at UW as we think about cultural change. I really believe that we're all racist in some ways, we're all sexist in some ways, we're ageist, we're homophobic. Everybody's got their isms. We grew up with them, and we can combat them and fight them, but we have to do that proactively, and we have to be self-aware about those issues. And one of the things I'd like to do is walk you through a little bit of data. The research shows that everybody, men and women alike, perceive and treat women differently from men. It's not just about men being sexist. I think a lot of you know this. Women are also sexist. It's just the culture that we grew up in. So let me talk a little bit about some data that illustrate this. There's a woman called Virginia Valiant at Hunter College in New York. She wrote a great book called Why So Slow. I would really recommend you get a copy. Get your HR people to buy it, and you guys can pass it around or whatever. It's really fantastic. It's concise. It's data-driven. There's a lot of good data in it. We're engineers and scientists. We love data. And so I'm going to give you a little brief rundown on a quick presentation that she made recently, Virginia Valiant. You're going to actually hear her voice here on issues of sexism. And just as a preface to this, you know, in the 70s, Gloria Steinem, a woman without a man is like a what? Fish without a bicycle. And then women have to be how much better than men? You know, what's that little thing? Women have to be twice as good as men. And fortunately, that's not hard. Remember that? I mean, there's all these little things, right? So there's this stuff about women have to be so much better than men to get the same success, to achieve the same success. Well, let's see what the data show. So I don't know, can you roll the clip in the back here? I don't seem to have a pointer capability. Here we go. I got it. Being engineering, I should be able to. That's my limited academic credential going. All right, so let's please listen and...
Recent data about the awarding of science postdoctoral fellowships in Sweden suggests that even early merit is more difficult for women than men to achieve. This was a study that was completed by two women, Lenaras and Wold, who had applied for fellowships and didn't get them. Sweden being a small country, they knew who a lot of the other people who applied for these fellowships were, and they thought that they were the equal of the people who had gotten the fellowships. Indeed, they thought they were better than some of the people who had gotten the fellowships. That particular year, 46% of the people who applied for the fellowships were female, but only 20% of the recipients were female. So they sued under Sweden's Freedom of Information Act to get the records of the panelists who had made the judgments about who should get one of these fellowships and who wouldn't get one. They analyzed the panelists' judgments and found that scientific competence ratings were the most important thing, as would be reasonable, that determined whether or not someone got one of these fellowships. And women didn't get scientific competence ratings that were as high as men were. They then tried to model these scientific competence ratings. They said, what are the objective indicators that these panelists had to have been paying attention to in order to determine who was more scientifically competent than someone else? The model that worked best was one they called total impact points. This was a combination of how many papers the young scientist had published, and the prestige of the journal that the scientist had published in. What they found was that for men, this measure predicted the scientific competence ratings very well. There was a nice linear relationship. But for women were basically flat between 0 and 100 impact points, and only started to rise in their scientific competence rating once they got 100 impact points. Women had to get 100 impact points in order to be judged with the same rating as men with 40 impact points had. So women were basically going along flat while men were increasing. Then the women's curve went up. It was parallel to the male curve. But, of course, women were going to get fewer of these fellowships than men were. The moral of this story is not that the Swedes, contrary to our beliefs about them, are unfair, discriminatory people. The moral of this story is people believe that they're being fair. People have the best intentions. People believe that they're making their judgments solely on the basis of merit and competence. But they are influenced by the sex of the applicant. Recent data about the awarding of science postdoctoral fellowships in Sweden suggests that even early merit is more difficult for women than men to achieve. This was a study that was completed by two women, Wennerast and Wold, who had applied for...
So based on that, how much better do women have to be? It was 2.5, right? Because it was 100 to 40. So, and the interesting thing about this, I think, for the notion of recruitment and then also retention, is that when we're looking at people coming into the doors here at Microsoft and trying to think about who we're going to hire, our hidden biases are going to make it a lot harder for women, and I believe the similar data would hold for underrepresented minorities, to make the cut. Because they have, white men start out with a DC offset, higher than everybody else. And the rest of us have to kind of climb up to that, and then we can start getting some points. So it's a very interesting study and very relevant to this whole notion. So I recommend the book. Let me talk a little bit about what I believe is one of the most important issues in changing the way we recruit and then also in changing the culture. I think a lot of this is about leadership. And as the dean, I'm kind of like the CEO of the College of Engineering. I really take a personal interest in how we recruit. I think it's the most important thing we do. We're all about people. And we've got to get the best faculty in the world if we want to compete. So when I arrived in '96, I really took a close look at the processes we were using to source people. And and my initial reaction was, well, gee, it seems like we're not doing very well on diversity. There aren't a lot of women. There are hardly any people of color from underrepresented groups. Maybe we need to take this existing process and tweak it to enhance the diversity of the pool, to source differently. As I peeled back the onion a little bit, what I found was it was much bigger than that. The process that we were using was fundamentally flawed. We were not being strategic about how we were recruiting. We were in the traditional academic mode, which goes something like this. Okay, we need a faculty member in electrical engineering. Let's put out an ad. 350 CVs will come flying in. We will determine as a faculty search committee which one of those 350 people is good enough to be one of us. It's an arrogance model, right? It's about which one of these will sift and winnow, and then they'll come crawling on their knees to take the job when we put the offer letter out. That's the kind of mentality. That might have worked 40 years ago. I don't know. It does not work now. I mean, when we get down to the last few finalists in CS and we're trying to reel those babies in, do you think we're the only ones who have a hook on them? There's 6 other schools. Which schools do you think those are? MIT, Princeton, Berkeley, Carnegie Mellon, right? We've all got hooks in those people. And so what I've worked with my folks on is let's figure out how we're going to turn this search process, search engine, into a recruitment engine where we're going to make UW look like a big magnet that they want to come to. We're going to make it a high-touch process. We're going to be very positive throughout. It's going to be candidate-centered. We're going to think about their needs. And I got very involved in that. And what I do is, I got real involved with developing the process along with the folks who were going to be doing the searching. And we actually put together a search toolkit. This is online if you guys want to go and look at it. The other thing that I do is I meet with every search committee every fall. So that's usually 10 search committees because we have 10 departments. And we sit down and we talk about what are the attributes we're looking for in people, what kind of process do we want to use, and what are we going to do to make this a really high-touch process. And, you know, my folks, generally, when I sit down with these groups, what do you think the demographic is of a search committee in the College of Engineering? 6 people, professors, mainly full professors, white, foreign-born, male, right? And so this is out of their zone. I mean, a lot of these issues are not the way they're generally thinking. And so I really have candid discussions with these folks about some of the diversity-related issues. And we talk about the fact that, gee, if you're interviewing an African-American candidate, that individual may well want to meet with other African-Americans on campus. Seattle, African-American. There aren't many. It doesn't necessarily go together. And many of our candidates for underrepresented groups, when we offer that kind of a thing, they want it. We don't have a lot of African Americans in the college, but as a campus, we have quite a few. So we've enlisted folks from other parts of our campus to help us do that recruitment and put in that high-touch component. When we talk about women, and it's a room full of guys, one of the things that I've had happen is, I'll give you an example. We were searching for a department chair. And this woman called me. She was from another state. And she said, hey, your search committee for this department chair job called me. They're interested in me. And I said, oh, that's great. You'd be really good. And she said, well, you know, there's one thing. He told me that this was a job for a woman. For a woman. The dean wanted a woman. And what's that about, Denise? And I'm like, well, that's sorry. That's not what I said. You know, we're looking for a great person. Well, she didn't apply. And she actually is now a dean somewhere else at a very prestigious school. And we might have had a shot at her, but do the men in the room, do you think that might have been offensive? I mean, what if somebody called you and said, well, we really need a white guy, Rick. You know, we got a white guy slot here. It's not about your competence or capability, but we need to check the box. The boss said we need a white guy. That's offensive. And so I now tell that story to the search committees. And I say, look, read my lips. I mean, I think the way this goes is, you talk to somebody like a woman talks to a room full of guys, and I'm saying A, B, C, D, and it goes through a prism or a lens, and it comes out X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. And they're hearing something kind of different from what I'm saying. So I'm into drawing diagrams, showing cartoons, you know, we try all different ways to get the information across. It's not an easy conversation. The other way we think about this is, you know, when you go to the opera now and there's super titles? That's another way to think about it. You're saying da-da-da-da-da, but you kind of need something over your head with a bubble that they can read. And this stuff is hard, you know. It doesn't just happen. You got to think about all these miscommunication points in the system. The other thing we hear a lot when we have these conversations is, oh, but Denise, there aren't any blanks, right? There aren't any African Americans getting PhDs in electrical engineering. Every year, the National Research Council puts out a monograph on how many of everything got graduated in the previous year, and then they break it down by demographics, PhD. I bring that to the meetings, and we all look at the hymnal together. Let's all look at page 4, and let's see how many there are. And it's important. Engineers and scientists are data-driven. And once my folks see that, they're like, oh, okay. You know, it's like an existence proof for them. Then they can go out and find them. But if they come in really thinking there aren't any, well, hell, they're not going to spend any time looking for them, right? Cast the net broadly. You have to source differently. You have to go to different places. Another anecdote I tell, and there's data behind this, the normal way we would do this is the professor in EE would pick up the phone, call his friend over at Berkeley, his friend at MIT in EE, usually one white male to another, phone call, say, who are your best? Give me the names. What do you think the demographic is of the names? White male. And that's just human nature. That's how it goes. So I ask my folks, when you do pick up the phone like that, ask them to think outside the box. Tell them that diversity matters to us. Think about people down the hall or across the way or whatever. So you got to shake it up and do things a little bit differently. The other thing I ask the departments to do is to be recruiting all the time. Even if there's not an opening, we should be out there recruiting, sourcing all the time. So for us, what might that mean? And maybe the same thing for you. You're at a technical conference. You see a person give an outstanding presentation. You go up to them and say, what a great talk. You know, let me give you my card. Have you ever thought about working at Microsoft? We'd love to take a look at you sometime. Well, what's unique about that? A, academics rarely praise. Okay? You're going to stand out in a crowd, and that individual is going to remember you. And when he or she is ready to make a move, they're going to have your card, and it'll make a huge impact. And it just gets a buzz going about your organization. And so I think there are simple things that those of you who are out there sourcing can do to really change the mix. And in particular, if you're at a conference and you see a woman, a person of color, whatever, give a presentation, it's a great presentation, work it. You know, get up there and make that connection. And you can bet nobody else is going to do it. Very few others will do it. So in terms of the recruitment piece, closing the deal, one of the things that we do, and I know that you guys also do some of this, is once we're getting toward the end, and I think there's something before this I want to do, the interview. At the time of the interview, we really focus on the candidate, so we try to customize the interview. What does he or she want? Like I mentioned about, you know, if it's a person of color, maybe they want to meet people from their community. Plan ahead. Really customize it to their needs. I mean, you've got needs too, and it's got to be a compromise, but try to make it focused on what they'd like. Equitable treatment. Make sure that men and women get the same kind of treatment at an interview. There are illegal questions, and in our toolkit you'll find these online. These are federal laws. What are the questions we're not allowed to ask in an interview? Do people know? Scream them out. Are you married? Age? Children? Sexual orientation is actually, I think, legal to ask because there's no protection. At least health, gender. And then I think, you know, religion, race. Who gets asked these questions? Women. People of color. When I interviewed for faculty positions, almost every place I went, they asked if I was married. And at one place, it was Minnesota, this older guy goes, so, are you married? And I'm like, I didn't answer him. Because I just figured I'm going to shut up, I'm not going to answer. See if he'll shut up. He goes, well, you know, I mean, you have a boyfriend? And I said, well, he was making it worse and worse. And I said, is this important to the job here? I mean, is this important to what I'm going to be doing here? You know, and then we kind of went down a rabbit hole. But and we had a woman interviewing at our place, and somebody in the department asked her, what are you? And you told me earlier what you are, but, you know, what are you? Now, she happens to be African American, you know, but that's an illegal question. Now, she came anyway, I'm guessing, because she got asked it everywhere, because we're all idiots, you know. Just like I got asked, are you married everywhere? I had to work somewhere. But if you don't ask those idiotic, illegal questions, you're going to be way ahead of a lot of other places. But it's up to you, folks, to educate everybody in the organization, support staff, visiting students, visiting scholars, permanent staff, who are going to meet the candidate. What are those illegal questions? A lot of people say no to a job because how they're treated at the interview.
So in the academic job interview process, I found that a lot of people ask you about your marital status, and they say, I want to know because
partner hire.
Your two problems.
Right. But it's not okay. I mean, there's other ways to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what are the other ways?
So what I do is, we're talking about the two-body or dual career issue. We have a 3-page list of benefits for new faculty. It breaks down research, you know, support, teaching and learning support, and work life. And under work life, one of the listed items is dual career, partner hire program. And so I walk people through this list, and I highlight a few of them, including that one. And I say, if you want to know any more about any of these, let me know, let somebody else know, look it up on the web. So you at least can convey that you're on it.
So you could say something like, we have help for finding
Yes,
jobs for partners.
you can say that. That's
Instead of asking you, do you need help?
And once you've made someone an offer, then you can, if you've made them an offer because it's no longer part of your job, your criteria for making them the offer, then you can say, are you married, is whether or not, is whether or not you have a spousal issue in terms of making a decision on the offer. Because you're no longer using that as criteria about whether or not to offer them the job.
The other thing I can tell you is that there's a young woman in one of our departments at the university who told me, she's lesbian, and she told me that we were the only university she visited that consistently used the term partner hire. And that made a big difference to her. We don't say spousal hire, we don't say married. We talk about partners because it's just much more inclusive. And language matters. I mean, it could be why she came to UW. And she had a lot of great offers. Yeah.
They offer information and they'll have a follow-up.
If they offer the information, my understanding is that you can have the conversation. I mean, if they open the door, I think you can go on and have, an ethical, appropriate conversation about it. But it's not, we can't open the door. Yeah.
But you have to be careful if someone looks and says, oh, I see you have 2 kids. You don't then say, oh, yeah, I do you have kids? You have to be careful. If they say it to you, you don't then, in the conversation, you don't say it back.
Right. You got to be educated about this a little bit. And I tend to avoid it. I tend to shy away because you just don't want to be in that gray area. But I can't say enough about how important how people are treated at the interview matters. And then I meet with every candidate. I meet with every faculty candidate. It probably ends up being 50, 30-minute time slots in my schedule over a 2-month period. And I think it's just important enough that I do it. I want to know what these people are like. I'm the kind of single unit level quality assessment to make sure we don't have a lot of unevenness going on. And it gives the candidate an opportunity to sit down with the CEO of the unit and get his or her question answered. Closing the deal, we always try to have an ambassador for the candidate during the end game. So while they have 7 hooks in them, our hook is a communicator, right? We're talking to them. We're providing information. They have a point of contact. We talk about partner hire. We really try to build equitable startup packages. And this is something that's not directly relevant to you guys, but in our setting, I try to make sure that folks think about using endowed faculty positions equitably. If you sat down and asked people to draw a picture of an endowed chair, the Microsoft chair, the Gates chair of XYZ, what would most people draw? An older white guy, right? I mean, it's just the way we think. And so we can use these kinds of perks to really diversify the workforce and not just keep using them on the same old suspects. The question comes, all right, high touch, this seems touchy-feely, does it do anything? It seems like a waste of time. We're scientists, we're engineers, we're computer scientists, we're not into that. All right, so we have some numbers, and then the next question is, well, yeah, you can get the numbers up of women and people of color. That's easy. All you have to do is, what? Lower the bar, lower your standards. Anybody could do that, right? So, the data. In a recent 18-month period, we had 22 new hires in engineering. 7 were women and 2 were African American. Do you think that's normal in engineering? No. That was because we really changed what we were doing. Now, are these lower quality people? Did we lower the bar? Everybody, do you guys know what the NSF Career Award is? It's this prestigious Young Investigator Award that's very competitive for young faculty pre-tenure. And it's real hard to get these. In 2001, we had 14 applicants from UW in engineering. 9 got it. And I went on the website at NSF. I couldn't find any other peer university that had that many career awards per capita in a single year in a college of engineering ever. Our base is 200. How many of those 200 people do you think are young enough to even compete, since the PhD? Not many. So 9, that's amazing. And then this year we had 8 applicants and 5 winners. And there's diversity among the winners. Women, it's not just a bunch of the guys getting this award. So this is kind of the data slide I like to leave up for a little while because It's related a little bit to the catalyst thing. This is our ROI, right? And for me, this one just tells the story. And you can see over the years, kind of since '01, how we've been doing on bringing in career awards. It's, there's some noise in there. Some of those people in the green bars would not get it one year and get it the next. You know what I mean? The applicants might not get it one year, but then they'd get it the next. And we hire unevenly. So like in one year, we might hire 15 people. In another year, we might hire 5. So we don't have a steady stream of people where the green bars would be kind of...
How does it compare to pre-1996?
Well, I would say pre-1996, the percentage of people getting career awards in the college was much smaller. So there was a big change in quality of our young faculty. And this, of course, bodes really well for the future, because these are the young people in the pipeline who are going to be the leaders. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know what individual departments, if any, within the college are the weakest in terms of diversity, and do you do anything special per department, or is it kind of a universal strategy for just engineering as a whole?
So the question is, does diversity vary from one department to another? It certainly does. Industrial engineering has a lot more women faculty and a lot more women students. Bioengineering, the same. Chemical engineering, a lot more women students and a few women faculty. CS has not very many women faculty and not very many women students. It reflects the national trends. Our overall success is high. We have about 22% bachelor's degree women, 30% master's, and something like 21% PhD or 20. It's high. And the national averages go something like 19 bachelors and then down, as you'd expect, 15 or 17 down to 14 at the PhD level. So we've done really well on students. We've done really well on faculty. It is uneven, and we do use different strategies in the different departments. So we have something called an NSF Advance Award.
Can I go back to your question? It must be that there are some faculties which are more resistant than others to changing their culture. Are there any tricks you have for resistant people?
So the tricks for me, and it comes back to the original slides about leadership. I think a lot of this is, as dean, who I appoint as department chair really, really matters, because the department chairs assemble the faculty search committees, which are made up of faculty, right? And depending on who's on that search committee, they can either implement this or not. Who chairs it matters. I've had a case where the department chair decided he himself would chair the search committee because he just didn't have anybody who could go off and run with this. And when he chaired the search committee, they hired the first woman they had ever hired in Aero-Astro. There aren't very many women faculty around the country in Aero-Astro. And she has since come in and gotten a Claire Booth Luce professorship and a career role. So I think the big trick is, who do you put in line management positions? And then they're going to be the ones who pick their associate chairs and so on. Who are they going to put in line management positions? So I think there's a grassroots piece, but there's also this top-down in the sense of building a infrastructure of leadership all the way up and down that gets this. Diversity and excellence go hand in hand. The end. Thank you very much. And then they have to educate their people. So I do my little bit by talking to the search committees, by talking about some of these issues at college-wide meetings, which nobody attends. I mean, people don't come to that very much, But I have to rely on the chairs. That's kind of the strategy. And I pick the chairs. So whose fault is it if the chairs don't get this? Mine. So the organization is not going to continue to move to the next level unless I make this issue a red light, green light issue when I'm appointing line management. Yeah.
What do you say when people say to you, don't we just want, like you're talking about diversity and people just say, don't we just want the best?
And I agree, like, it could go hand in hand, but what's your response to that question? I get that a lot.
So I think when people say, don't we just want the best, there's 2 or 3 things that come to mind. If you just do the same old thing in an engineering environment, the best will be white men, because that's what the normal sourcing procedures turn up. And so the way I think about it is, if you really want to get the best, you want to be sourcing from a broad spectrum of types of people. In philanthropy, we have this saying that if you don't ask for money, you don't get it. And people talk about leaving money on the table. You've probably heard that expression, right? I think about this as leaving brains on the table, right? If you don't source broadly, you're not going to get the best, sorry. You're going to get the best of this narrow spectrum you're sourcing. And so, sure, I agree, all we want's the best. But I think to get the best, we have to do different kinds of business. It's not only about sourcing. I mean, I'm going to get into the retention piece in a minute. So yeah, I mean, I think there's answers to that question. I think also that you can make an argument that says if you only source and identify the best white men, and everybody you hire, here's your bar, everybody you hire is up here, and they're all white men. They're great. They're all great. Can you think of something earlier in the talk that says maybe that's not good enough? The catalyst thing? Right? If the organization isn't diverse, it's not going to do the best work for a diverse client pool. So I think there's a number of ways to approach that. But I'm not talking about lowering standards. No way, Jose. I mean, that's just not what I do. You know? Yeah.
I think when someone refers to diversity, and then the next comment of, well, don't we really want the best? It really focusing on a narrow perspective, and that perspective is possibly an all-white audience or some other audience. The world is a global, it's people, it's diverse. So when you think of that, I think back on a book I read years ago where it says none of us is as smart as all of us. So you're eliminating a very fruitful supply of energy, of resources that fundamentally, it's not just the right thing to do, it is the thing to do, So, that's my insight into, my entire career life, has been in a white world. I ask my colleagues, how many black friends or friends of color do you have? And I see that all the time. I worked as an engineer right out of school, and my entire career for 7 years, I didn't see a black person at all. And matter of fact, my company didn't believe that there were any other out there. It was just ludicrous, But diversity is, it's not that piece that says, are we just looking for the best? Yes, we really are looking for the best, and I think the best is a part of that diverse community.
I agree completely. Well said. Yeah.
So I just wanted to follow up on the statement you made earlier about how you came in and sort of set this substrate upon which a healthy organization can grow. Sort of following up on your comment, anytime you have an existing organization, you sort of threaten that power structure. I think you get answers like, don't you just want the best? And so my question is, how do you do that? I think there becomes this affiliative link when you have this sort of homogeny at the top. How do you break into that? How do you form affiliations when the paradigm is so different from the type of diversity we're trying to foster?
So I think that's a great question. And one of the things, coming back to leadership, and this may sound like a broken record, I inherited 10 department chairs. And 1 or 2 of them were really, really good. And we're going to be able to run with a new direction that the faculty wanted to go in, not just me. I mean, everybody had a new vector. And one of the ways we laid the substrate was I put together an ad hoc committee to review the whole college, kind of at 35,000 feet. What are our issues? And This committee came out with a great report. It was fast. It was not your academic 10-year timeline, you know. I assembled the committee at Halloween. By Christmas, they had an interim report up on the web, and this was in '96. This was all web-based. It was, you know, one of the early uses of the web in this unique way, community way, because everybody could put their data in on the web and write things in on the web, or they could do it in person or whatever. And by December, they had their interim report, and by Valentine's Day, they had their final report. And what this said, the they being the community, was saying we need to empower our staff, we need to embrace diversity, we need to be more student-centered, and we need to restructure the organization in the following kinds of ways. That was like the manifesto, right? And once that was in place, it empowered me to move based on that input. Of the 10 chairs, how many of them do you think were ready to move on that agenda? I mean, none, one or two. And 6 or 7 resigned, just boom, boom, along the way. And there was the joke going around the college was that when you called our phone, the answering machine said, "You've reached the College of Engineering. If you're a department chair calling to resign, please press 1. So that was a part of the substrate, getting new leadership. And without new leadership, it wouldn't have been able to happen. Now, I reached out to faculty to kind of try to push some of this agenda, but in a big organization like that, you really can't do a whole lot of one-on-one. I had to rely on the chairs to be pushing this message and getting some of this out, in addition to the kind of things I would do. Yeah.
We're going into questions. I just want to point out that the comment earlier about asking about gender is not so much a joke, because a lot of the application process is on paper.
Right.
And I have a very specific personal experience showing that it really mattered. When I was in grad school, I changed my last name when I got married. So my vita had to explain why some papers were under one name and the other, so I tried to explain this. I got married. When it came time to apply for jobs, I sent out 24 letters, just cold letters to the top schools. It was a good time. And I got, out of those 24, only 3 letters back saying, sorry, we're not at all interested. Like I said, it was a very good time for jobs. Of those 3, 2 addressed me as Mrs. Then the other 2, they just made the assumption, I changed my name when I got married. Mrs. We're not interested.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
The question was, I go on to hypothetical question. No, you're not Dennis Denton, but you are, I don't know, Alphonse, whatever a name. I'm one of your chairs. I have also had a female candidate. I want to hire her. She's sort of very energetic. I really would like to get her. She comes to me and says, why should I come to you? Look, you are male, your dean is male. Why should I come to this university? I have not, what do I do? Because at some point, a lot of us will sit inside this situation, right?
I think it's a good question, you know. If you've got a real go-getter woman, she's trying to, you know, break into a new field, be in her first job, whatever, or third job, and there are women who do, many women, who look at the org chart and look at the top and look at the first few lines of management and look at the demographic and decide not to go to a place because the demographic doesn't reflect them in it at the leadership level. So I think if I'm Alphonse, I maybe get a succession plan so that the next, you know, CEO is Maria. I think it's part of what you have to do. You have to have mixed management to really send you got to show a reality, not just a message. The reality has to be that women and underrepresented minorities are taking on leadership positions. So I think if it's Alphonse and Mark, who are the upper 2 management, you're going to lose some women. And if Alphonse and Mark are white, you're going to lose some people of color. And I know in the academic side, a lot of women looking at grad schools will turn down a full ride 4-year package of grad fellowships because there aren't any women faculty. They don't want to go there. Yeah.
I think that brings up a good point. What you're saying is how do you recruit and attract these people when you're almost at ground zero? And that's probably where you were in 96. And I'm sure what you found is 7 years later you have a much easier time because the women you initially attracted are recruiting others and you build on that sort of cumulative effect. So I think one of the hardest times is at that initial stage.
I think you have to effectively utilize women in the organization, wherever they are, right? At the time of get women involved in your recruitment process, get them involved in designing the process, not just being involved in the interview loop. And even if they're not high up on the management chain, if they're go-getters and, the people interviewing can see that they're on a vector, they might be willing to take a shot. But I think you just have to be thoughtful about how you position the organization so that women and underrepresented minorities coming in see some diversity when they move through the system. I think they'd be willing to come. I think that it's how they feel when they're there. What's the culture like? How are they being treated? So, yeah.
Do you ever worry that some of these techniques could be interpreted as being condescending?
I do, and I think you have to be really careful. I think it's condescending, particularly if you're not asked about it, okay? I remember doing some interviews where I was, interviewing at R1s for faculty positions, and they would intentionally assign a female grad student to kind of escort me around. And it was transparent and dumb, and it was the only thing they did to really try to show me any, diversity. So I think you have to be thoughtful about it, and the approach I've taken is that I will often just query people, what would you like to do? What would you like to see? And if a woman or person of color doesn't explicitly raise some of these things, I might put it out there as, and I don't do this anymore, the search committee might put it out there as, well, we have a few other things we could offer. Are you interested in this or this? The other thing that I do is we have this program called Advance, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And it's an NSF-funded program that focuses on advancing women faculty in science, math, and engineering. When I meet with all the faculty candidates, I give every single one a one-pager on Advance, male and female. And then I explain to everybody why it's a benefit to the whole organization. So, there's things you can do. I think you do have to be careful because it can be condescending if you don't handle it. Once, somebody was talking about how once this gets going, it can really take off. Our EE department now, one of the pictures in here, I didn't tell you what it was, but those are all EE faculty, and that's not all of them in our College of Engineering. Do you think that's unusual? 20% or so of the EE faculty are women, and that they work it. And it is word of mouth now. It is like the place people want to be, the place women want to go to work. So any other questions about recruitment? Because I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit more about retention and cultural change. Yeah.
Early on in your presentation, you talked about how women are just as discriminatory as men are, especially towards other women. How can we combat that in our recruitment process?
So the question is about women being sexist as well as men being sexist. I think, it has to start with individuals. We have to be self-aware and try to be careful about how we're interacting with people. I think people who are in leadership positions have to be educating everybody about it. There's a real interesting little analysis that I can get a copy to Jennifer, and you guys can look at. The people at Wisconsin, in their Advance Award, same award from NSF, they put together a little monograph on recruitment bias. And one of the stories I remember from that, it's data-based. It's an analysis that was done at Harvard, I believe. The Harvard Medical School, somebody looked at all the faculty candidates who were accepted and offered a job at the Harvard Medical School and took it. So these were people who got job offers. And they looked at all the letters for the women and all the letters for the men, outside letters, written by men and women. So who wrote them didn't matter. What they found was that all the letters of reference for women had what they called grindstone adjectives. What do you think they were? Can you name a few? Assiduous, responsible, reliable, right? And all the letters for men tended to have things that you would call luminary adjectives. You want to name some of those? Outstanding, brilliant, best in class. And this was across the board, okay? So when we read letters or when we're cascading information down the interview loop, that you guys do, sending your emails down to the next 8 people seeing the candidate. Women, you might think about what adjectives are you using to describe female candidates, right? Because it's all kind of built in. It's locked in. And there's very specific things that we know about how some of this works. So getting educated about it can help. Anything else on recruitment? Yeah.
I guess I'm coming from ground zero. The math department of Georgia Tech has 2 women out of close to 50 faculty. And that's been the case for 10 years, if not longer. So part of recruitment and retention is how to deal with, say, 2-body problems. So we can make the case that, yes, we widen your pool, and then you will find, the person that's not white male. But say the spouse. So since I've been there for the last 10 years, the cases where we've lost in terms of hiring a good candidate who was a woman was because the spouse got a job elsewhere or something like that. How to deal with that?
So one observation I would make, and I would recommend it to everybody at Microsoft too, is throw in the trash bin the term 2-body problem and call it partner hire or partner opportunity. I mean, how we frame these things matters. What we've found is that these partner hire opportunities can be real opportunities. Now, if the partner's a dud, there's nowhere to really go with that, right? I mean, nobody's going to advocate, well, gee, just let's throw them in the physics department and run away. It's not going to work, right? But if the partner is somebody who's got something really to add, some value, then it becomes the partner opportunity. And we've had some really bang-up partner hire situations where both of them have come in and set the place on fire. So to get back to the Georgia Tech issue, we've created at UW a culture of collaboration around partner hire. The deans work well together with respect to these opportunities. And so as soon as we see a faculty candidate who looks really, really good, and it's surfaced by them that they have a partner, we're on it. And we start on it before we make the offer. Behind the scenes, we're not even, we'll tell them, well, gee, in case this goes to the next level, can we get your partner's CV? We'll just be taking a look at it. We're not taking a look at it. We're trying to set something up. Because in the academic schedule, as you all know, we're making our offers in like April or May, and if we wait till the time we make the offer and then go to the physics department and say, hey, we've got this great person, it's too late. I mean, there's no way we're going to get them both. So we work it, and we work it as a team, and we work it early. And we've gotten we lose some. I mean, you can't win them all, but we do get quite a few of these to come. Yeah.
Just one thing that I want to say about people complaining about 2-body problems. What I always say is that, smart people tend to marry smart people. I mean, it's a bigger mistake if you marry the wrong person than if you hire the wrong person. It's pretty bad if you hire the wrong person. It's a real disaster if you marry the wrong person. So I think that there's a reasonable correlation that if you're pretty smart, I mean, it's not a perfect correlation at all, but actually that person may really be worth looking at.
Yeah.
For a partner of the
Right.
A question about the pipeline problems and what are you doing to address getting more women into, graduate school?
Right. So the question is about pipeline and computer science. We have a lot of K-12 outreach programs on campus, and we have, in particular, MESA, which is Math, Engineering, Science Achievement, that's patterned on a California-based program. And MESA has 4 or 5 satellites around the state, in Spokane and Yakima, Tri-Cities. And what we do is we work with teachers in rural and urban settings where the schools have a highly diverse population, and we try to identify talented students all the way back to kindergarten, elementary, and that we work with tribal schools. And we have a powerful parents component, so parents have to get involved from the beginning. And so this is kind of like the athletic model for talent search. You know, the coach du jour over at Husky Field knows who the good quarterbacks are in 8th grade. You don't wait till, you know, senior year. You know. And this is the same kind of a model, but we're going back even farther than that. And we're monitoring and tracking these kids. We're getting them into, you know, Saturday college and doing all kinds of programs. So we're working on the broader issue of science and engineering. On computer science in particular, David Notkin, the current department chair, is really focused on getting more girls interested in CS. And he's got a variety of activities that he's doing. One in particular is with the Seattle Girls School, the new school over in Seattle that's focusing on girls in middle school who really want to be in science or engineering. So we're doing some things, but we don't have a magic bullet. If you haven't seen the work from CMU, Alan Fisher and company, on opening the clubhouse, that's great. And they've got a really good model. Parts of that model would work in this area, and we're trying to do some best practices from that. So anything else on recruitment, any best practices that you all know about that we haven't chatted about here that you might want to toss out to the group? Yeah.
Two quick points. One is about, I work on collaboration. One thing comes that there is an effective diversity, not just in the certain client base, not only tackle a problem or work. In the case it was anecdotal, but worked with a guy on a problem. We got 2/3 of the way what we thought was 2/3 of the way, and we're completely stuck for a year. And there was a woman who joined the team, and she had a different idea coming from a different place. So the diversity can be reflected in, you know, it's diversity of backgrounds, also in terms of education, discipline, and all of these forms of diversity. The other quick anecdote specific about women is two women mathematicians at Berkeley, two women mathematicians who I talked to and are quite, you know, very successful now, and asked them how, you know, what was the crucial moment for them to go into math. And both of them were in grad school. One was in Geneva and one was in Harvard, and they didn't have any women faculty when they were students. And for both of them, the crucial moment was when a woman who was really well respected came and gave a colloquium, and it was clear that everyone might work, and then they thought, okay, I can do it. For both of them, it was actually the same woman, Caroline Series from England, who influenced, without knowing the career of these two grad students. So it shows how huge the role models are, that this one role model played the role in these two different places.
Yeah, those are great points, and you know, your first point, Bill Wolf makes that point a lot from his perch as the head of NAE, and you know he's a computer scientist. He makes this point that diverse engineering teams are going to create a better product, and more quickly and more efficiently. So I think that's really important too. So, yeah.
Ask for female and non-white faculty members to take an extra step in mentoring people?
We have a big mentoring effort, and I'm going to describe that here. And we try not to burden just the women and people of color with that, because, you know, that's the classic problem, right? That the underrepresented folk end up on every committee and mentoring every other underrepresented person. So we're trying to come up with scalable strategies that don't put it all on their shoulders. So, advance, I've mentioned. The NSF goal is to increase the participation of women in STEM and to advance them explicitly during their faculty careers. So this is not K-12, this is not undergrad, this is not grad student primarily. This is about moving women faculty to crash through the glass ceiling and take on leadership roles in academia. And the UW objectives, I'm not going to read through these, but the bottom line is probably the fourth one: increase the numbers of women in leadership positions in STEM, in the academy, and particularly at UW. I want to focus a little bit on the last bullet here. A lot of times when we approach diversity efforts, let's say this one, we're talking about women, we think about women as a monolithic entity. What do women want? What can we do to help the women? Like it's just this, you know, and obviously we know that women's more like a spectrum. There's all kinds of women. And so when we wrote our proposal, we really emphasized that we want to think about race, ethnicity, GBLT, class, disability, ability, all different aspects. So this is not a one-size-fits-all.
What's GBLT?
Gay, bisexual, lesbian, transgender. So we really wanted from the beginning, you know, if you lived through the 70s and CR sessions and all of that, one of the big things that one of the big issues at that time that was polarizing was this a movement for white women, or was this a women's movement? And a lot of people of color, women of color, really felt this was a white women's show, right? Gloria Steinem et al. So this is an old issue. This is not like a new issue. And we, from the beginning, wanted to try to avoid that polarization, but it is not easy. And we've been struggling with this at UW. You don't just fall off a log and really be inclusive. You have to think through it. The departments involved come from engineering and arts and sciences. They're the STEM departments listed here. Computer science is one of those. What we've done is we've created a Center for Institutional Change, and it has several key areas. One area is, so let me just say, this is about retention, right? This is about cultural change. This is about creating a climate where everybody's going to feel welcome, everybody can be productive, morale will be high, and people will wake up in the morning and go, thank God I work at UW. I'm so glad I'm going to be getting in my car and driving to UW, or riding my bike or the metro to UW today, you know? That's what we want. And the way we're approaching this is leadership development for current chairs and deans and emerging leaders. So there's a succession plan component here. And the premise is that if you want to move the ship in a direction, you've got to have good leaders who can help to move it, right? And academia has been notoriously bad in leadership development. So we're really focused on that. The second one is department cultural change. No matter what we do at 35,000 feet as leaders and in policy transformation, which is another piece, people live and die in their department, right? So, or for you guys, a division or a business unit or whatever. And you know that different business units can have very different cultures, and particularly around diversity. So we want to get all those units to have high-functioning cultures that are welcoming and embrace difference. So we work on that. Policy transformation, any big organization like yours or ours, you can have policy that no longer matches mission, because mission has changed. Policy forgot to change. And if you really want to make an open and diverse organization, policy's got to move. Mentoring, we have a mentoring effort, and I'll say a little more about that. We have a transitional support program that provides support for faculty moving through life transitions like child care, elder care, health crisis, or even transitions across ranks, you know, promoting through the organization. This has helped people a lot, and it's particularly beneficial to women, because who tends to bear the burden of those kind of things I listed? So while the guys are running along the track, the woman's trying to hop on a leg, or her legs are tied together, and we don't want her to get behind during that transition, so we give a little extra support there. Although we do let guys apply for this as well. Visiting Scholars Program brings in people who either can help us on the change issues, or people who would be visiting one of the departments who might be a potential recruit downstream, junior or senior, or a role model, like you were talking about, you know. Just bringing somebody in for a little while and then boom, that's a role model for the 30 people in the unit. So that's the core of it, and these things, I think, have made a really huge difference for us. I'm not going to say a whole lot more about them. I'd be happy to talk more about leadership development. This has been absolutely key. We have quarterly workshops for all of our current chairs and deans and emerging leaders or proteges, where we talk through issues that really matter to leadership, on-the-ground issues, and we try to weave into these case studies that we do diversity pieces. You know, what's the diversity aspect of X, building a startup package, or partner hire, or how to move people who are stuck in the associate professor level to the full professor level. So we really get into the issues that our chairs are struggling with. And they have enjoyed this a lot. These are half-day workshops. Like I said, we do them quarterly. These are some of the topics at the bottom that we've dealt with in these things. And these have been a really smashing success. I've been amazed. Because, you'd think people who are busy 24/7, after the first couple, they kind of trail off and not come back. They all come to these. And our original conception was that these would be once a year, 2-day retreats. And we did a 1-day pilot right after we got the grant. And the feedback we got from the chairs is, we love this, we love the networking, the content's good, but make them shorter and make them more frequent. And so that's been really valuable for folks. That's kind of what I just said. Department cultural change, this is the hardest one. Okay? This is tough, and we don't have a magic bullet for this, but we are developing strategies for what we're doing right now. Is we've got an outside consultant who knows a lot about organizational dynamics and change, and he's working with departments in groups of 3 or 4 departments that come together in small workshops, and each department brings the chair and a couple of senior people. And these are mostly men, just because of the demographics of the departments. And they are laying out what they think their baseline is in their department, what is the baseline culture, and what's their aspiration, where do they want their department culture to be. And then they're developing strategies for how they're going to move. And we provide resources and facilitation for that. Yeah? These workshops? Yeah. What I would say is, and I haven't attended all of them, I've just kind of greeted them and moved on, but what we've observed is that the first workshop, it was not quite overtly hostile, but there was a lot of skepticism, there was a lot of silence. Once we got into the second or third workshop with the same group, and they started getting a lot more into it, and the facilitator said, well, we've only done 2 hours here today because we didn't want to eat up a lot of their clock time. Had we done 3 or 4, we could have delved a lot more into these issues. And the guys, and they were mainly guys, said, we're willing to come and do this at 5 o'clock and stay for 3 hours if you'll feed us, and if we can get more into the content and the action. So it's working. It started out rocky, but we're really, client-centered. We're trying to figure out what's going to make these guys think this is going to add value for them. And then we take it from there. But it wasn't a walk in the park. So this is what I'm talking about. It's the Department Transformation Grant. That's another thing we've done. The Department Transformation Grant, we had an RFP, and we let chairs kind of write what would help them move their department. We have a faculty recruitment toolkit. I've mentioned that. It's online. And we have now a faculty retention toolkit. That's online. It has some best practices and some things you can do. And then the cross-department cultural change thing, that's the one I just described with the workshops with multiple departments. This is kind of a repeat of some of the earlier things. I'd be happy to drill down more later. Policy transformation, well, you got to do it, right? And policy tends to be cast in stone. And organizations then get stuck with policy that doesn't reflect what they're trying to achieve. And so somebody's got to mind the store on policy and make sure that it really reflects your goals. We're doing a variety of things around part-time tenure track careers. We got a grant from Sloan to work on that. Dual career hire, that's one of the policies that we're looking at. Family leave, these are the kind of policies. Most of the policies at UW were historically written for men faculty, because they didn't have all these issues. So we're building up new policies that reflect the needs of a different demographic of faculty. The mentoring program, what we've found works, and what we polled our faculty by rank, the women faculty, and we asked them what they wanted. They wanted workshops, and they wanted leadership development via workshop. And so this is what you might call a mass mentoring model as opposed to the one-on-one mentoring model. They didn't feel they needed help with the one-on-one. They could kind of go out and find that. And this mass mentoring has been very successful. At least 2 or 3 times a month, we have either an internal UW woman leader or an external leader come from around the country We plop them in a room for 2 hours, and we just say, y'all come to the women faculty in the advanced departments.
2 to 3 times a month.
Yeah, and they are coming.
Pretty frequent.
They are coming. I mean, I was amazed. And it's every time there's about 15 women. It's a different 15 women every time. We have more than you do in MSR, you know. I think we have about 65 women across these 20 departments. And so a different 15 are at every workshop. They love it, and they keep coming back. I mean, that's the test, right? So this mass mentoring or industrial strength mentoring model has really worked for us. And it's not just the juniors who are coming. Senior women who want to learn more and understand about, you know, moving up in the organization are coming as well. So that's worked real well for us. So that just says more about how we're doing that. And we have a grad student program as well. I've talked about the transitional support program already. Some of the details are here. We've given 25 grants to date. The average size is $20K. They use them for whatever they want. They write a simple proposal that says, this is my transition, this is what would help me get through it. And we only give the grants to women and men faculty who are doing really well. I mean, we're not going to support somebody who's, you know, not of high quality. There's no value to us for that. Like, one thing that's not on here, there was a woman who was between grants. She'd had a child, and the child had a developmental disability, and it really sucked off a lot of her time. So she wasn't able to get her proposals out. So she wanted us to buy her some pregnant mice. Whatever. You know? We bought the pregnant mice. She then went on to get a great grant and has been publishing now. So it was just what she needed. Some pregnant mice. Great. You know? There were women mice, so it worked with the whole thing. And then there's a visiting scholars program. I've told you about that already. Just churn, you know, moving people through the system, getting some different perspectives, some outside, men and women. We don't just have female visiting scholars. People who've thought deeply about a lot of these diversity issues. They can come in and help us. Institutionalization. So when we wrote this proposal, the president and the provost said, this is great that you're going to start out focusing on these 20 departments, but we want this to have impact campus-wide, beyond the 20 departments. So as we've moved through the life of the grant, and we're in the 3rd year of 5 years, we've tried to export and scale up the things we find that work very well, so that they have a positive impact campus-wide. And there's a list there of the ones that we're doing that with. What one thing absolutely has to be part of our program for us to be successful, we found it's the steady drumbeat of activities, constant, grinding away at these issues. It catalyzes the cultural change, it keeps people involved, it increases networking, targeted content at the workshops, hitting people where they live. You know, nobody wants to come to a workshop that's kind of tertiary to what they're trying to accomplish. But if you can hit people where they live and integrate into whatever that content is, diversity-related materials, just interwoven, that we've found to be the way to go for busy folks. These things don't matter that much. Here's some data. Our baseline year was fall 01, and since then we've gone from 60 women faculty in advanced departments to 72. So, you know, a pretty big, again, is it causal? Who knows? But we'll claim it. Because if it went the other way, NSF would sure say, gee, why'd we give you the money, right? So we're going in the right direction in terms of women faculty. And then you can kind of look at promotions. This is by rank. So these are the 3 years of the grant and what's happening with assistants, associates, and fulls. Notice the full curve, which is really what advanced is about, is on the march, right? More and more women getting that full professor rank. And then this is how our faculty lay out in terms of assistant, associate, and full professor, and total male and female across those departments, just to give you some sense of percentages. What did not work as well as we expected? Getting senior women involved. They don't have very many cycles. There aren't very many of them, and they don't have very many cycles. And so we've had to build a lot of infrastructure around senior women. So all they have to do is parachute in and do their workshop. right? We take care of all the logistics and so on. Mass mentoring takes some of the burden off the shoulders of senior women so that they're not having to spend quite so much time with individual women. The other thing mass mentoring does is, in a lot of these workshops, when a woman has a problem that's now a molehill, she can raise that problem. This is my molehill. And 4 other people go, oh, well, here's how I've dealt with that molehill in the past. If you don't have this frequent mentoring going on, what does the molehill become? Mount Everest. And then some senior woman has to spend 2 months, trying to deal with this horrible problem and help the younger woman. So I think there's some unintended positive consequences that have come from the frequent mass mentoring. And then at the bottom here, I would just close with, it's been really challenging to work on this diversity among women thing. This is tough stuff. And when you really get into diversity in a meaningful way, you immediately start hitting conflict. And a lot of scientists and engineers are conflict avoiders. They don't want to go there. They don't want to deal with that. They'd rather walk away than deal with conflict. And of that personal kind, that emotional kind. It's not a scientific argument, I know you guys are good at that here. But the emotional content stuff, that's hard. And so it's just hard to do, and you got to give people some tools, and you got to create some space for that conflict. What Lonnie Guinier says on these issues, she's done a lot of work on diversity, and she says that's where you want to get to, is the conflict, because once the conflict starts coming out, that's when you're going to learn. You're going to learn what the issues are in the organization. You're going to learn what needs to be changed, and you shouldn't be afraid of the conflict. It's like, skate to where the puck's going to be. Skate to that conflict, and that's what's going to help your organization get better. But that's hard. That's easy to say and hard to do, because people start really getting emotional. It's touchy. It's kerosene and matches. And there needs to be some facilitation. But we've found that that's where you really have to get to if you want to make the work happen. Yeah.
I really have to applaud you for making such progress as you have. I personally work in the staff and marketing group here within HR, and our group exists to promote Microsoft to pools of talent, and most often to diverse pools of talent. So we're, as a corporation, big sponsors of SHIP, Society of Professional Engineers, of Black Engineers, of SWE, Society of Women in Engineering, as well as the MBA organizations.
Right.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to put a couple things that we do in the corporation here. One is DigiGirls, first week of August, a program for 13 to 15-year-old women to come in and experience what life is like here. Our internship program for high school kids, if your department has an opportunity to host an intern, and especially at the high school level, please get involved with that program. It's a great program. And then finally, I do want to mention that we have a great program with the Take Your Children to Work Day. Every year it seems to be a struggle to find departments who are willing to host talks. So if you have that chance, please do take it. I know they're right now organizing the program for the fall, and now's a chance to get involved.
Right? Yeah.
How do you help people recognize excellence that doesn't look like them? Isn't a linear thinker like them, or isn't a brainstormer like them, or isn't have the Microsoft passion like them,
I think that's a really insightful question. I think all of us have a knee-jerk reaction to replication. We're wanting to replicate ourselves. And it's just a lot easier to look out and see somebody, oh yeah, that person's just like me, and I'm great, so they must be great too, They act like me, they think like me. And I think you just have to get it out on the table. This is the kind of conversation we have when I'm talking to the hiring committees. We want to be really thoughtful about moving away from that. And, one example I would give you is our department chair in AeroAstro. When this woman surfaced and had risen to the top or near the top of the candidate pool, her academic credentials were also weak. She was like PhD, Caltech, postdoc, Harvard, or vice versa, And some of the men in that department absolutely were not going to vote for her. And it was crystal clear that this was about she didn't look like them, and they could not envision an aeronauticist female. And so the department chair just had to work it and work it and work it. And I think somebody in the organization has to identify when that's happening and then confront people about it and work it. And ideally, some of that conversation happens before the search ever begins, so that you've got some groundwork you've laid about, at least philosophically, that this is something that can happen. And then when it does happen, you can come back and say, ding, 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 here we are. We talked about this, remember? She doesn't look like me, or he doesn't look like us, but, he could be really good. The flip side is also true in that one of the things that I've done, as I said, I meet with all the candidates. When I see an individual that I think is a real jerk, no matter how smart he or she is, I'm vetoing that candidate. I don't want to bring him in. And what I say to the department is, there's a lot of smart people out there on the 42 bus, and we don't need to pick one up who's a jerk. Let's go find one who's collegial, who's going to make the organization better and care about more than just him or herself. Yeah.
More value, integrity, honesty, and then look for what's missing. What do we have and what is missing, and then you complement each other, and as a whole, as a sum, you make a better outcome. But you do want to start with some core values for that.
Right. And it really is about building a team, building an ensemble, building an orchestra, so that you cover all the bases that you need to cover. It comes back to the comment that was made about diversity and, how it makes the organization better and the product better. Not just that it can deal with a diverse client base.
People get scared when something is different. They think, I must be better, or mine, whatever my perception is, it must be better. But opening your eyes to what else is out there is tremendous value, because there is so much that, we all are, limited to our own, just our experience, and everybody else has such unique things that they bring to it that it's just important to look beyond what's on your own shoes. So
it seems like resonating throughout is this, we want to hire the best, right? And it seems like the measures that we use to quantify who's the best aren't the correct measures, right? You have several examples here, like a study in Finland, or Sweden, right? And obviously that's the wrong quantitative measure. You're saying about the letters and adjectives used for these equally qualified people, obviously that's a quantitative statement about how this is a mismeasure, right? So I wonder if it would be valuable to try and enlighten people about how these quantitative measures are actually not at all on the mark. Since we have to be broader, we need to think more broadly too about how to have yardsticks.
That's part of the conversation. This is an ongoing thing, and in advance, as we get data like this with the letters, we share it with our promotion and tenure committees, with our hiring committees, so that people become aware that same old of, person X said she's just assiduous. We want people to understand that it's not what it seems, and that there's all these isms operating just under the surface. So I think, the old best is not what we're trying to shoot for. We got to think differently about how we're going to look at candidates. And another example is coming into grad school, applying to grad school. John Wiley, who's now the chancellor at University of Wisconsin, when he was the dean of the grad school there, he did an analysis to determine what factor at the time of application to grad school was predictive of success in grad school, right? So what factors do we typically look at? GPA, SAT would be GRE at this point. Letters, essay, blah, 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 right? So does anybody want to guess what factor or factors might have correlated with success in grad school? Huh? Yeah, the only factor that correlated was time of application. The people who applied earliest prior to the deadline did the best of this. People who applied the last minute for all of you last minutes out there. Sorry. That was it. So it's a perfect example of all the old crud we look at and we're so committed to and wedded to and believe. It's got to be revisited. So any other, yeah?
Earlier you mentioned about the high touch, and I deal sometimes with visa programs at different schools, and I was just visiting very recently the international student office side of the UW, and I was really impressed because there seemed to be a lot of high touch stuff on that. They had connecting people with groups and all kinds of stuff.
We have a display.
I want to sign up with these guys. It sounded really fun. It sounded very interactive, a lot of opportunity for people to get involved right away with the student body and make connections.
We pay a lot of attention to making sure that international students are welcome and that they are introduced to the community, that they're, deployed out to all kinds of different social events, and they get plugged in. Yeah, they really do. Anything else? I think we're kind of out of time here. Okay, great. Thanks.